Hi, everyone. This is Mrs. Pearson, your elementary ELL teacher. Today I'm going to focus on Chapter 13 of Bud Not Buddy and the vocabulary words and phrases 1 to 8. So for this lesson, you will need a pencil and a piece of paper or journal page. You're going to divide the paper into 3 equal parts or thirds. Then you're going to write your numbers 1 to 8. So what you need to do is make sure you have your pencil, paper, and you write your numbers 1 to 8. So if you need to, push pause, get your paper or pencil, write your numbers 1 to 8, and then when you're ready to join me, push play. After you write your word, in the next column, I want you to write a synonym. And a synonym is a word that means the same or is similar. For example, combine is a synonym for mix. And if you don't catch the synonym, it's okay. You could write the word a second time. And then in the third column, I want you to draw a quick picture or sketch to help you remember each of the words or phrases. So here's our learning target. I can use pictures and context clues to help me understand important words and phrases from Chapter 13 of Bud Not Buddy. Here's our success criteria. That means how will you know you're successful at understanding important words and phrases from Chapter 13? Well, here are our steps to success. Number 1, I will write down each vocabulary word. Number 2, I will write a synonym or short definition for each word. Number 3, I will listen and follow along to each quote from the chapter. Look for the vocabulary word. And then finally, I will go back and draw a quick sketch for each word. All right, so listen here. Idiom. Idiom is a type of figurative language. An idiom is a saying that has a completely different meaning than the actual words themselves. So here's an example of an idiom. It's raining cats and dogs, so take your umbrella. So number 1, this is your little red wagon, you pull it. So that is a saying, and I want you to write it. This is your little red wagon, you pull it. What does that mean? It means this is your responsibility and you get to deal with the consequences, good or bad. So after you write, this is your little red wagon, you pull it, a synonym or short definition could be what I highlighted in green, your responsibility. And again, that's an idiom. And here's a moose pulling a little red wagon. So and here's some pictures of responsibility, people taking responsibility for good things and bad things, for consequences that are good or bad. So here's the quote with this idiom. The man named Jimmy and the guy who had been my daddy, had to be my daddy, started whispering. After a while, Herman E. Calloway raised his arms and said, "Hey, but don't forget, this is your little red wagon. You pull it if you want." So Herman E. Calloway said to Jimmy, "This is your little red wagon." And that's who he said it to, meaning this is your responsibility and you get to deal with the consequences, whether they're good consequences or bad. So here's an idiom that is similar to this is your wagon, you must pull it. You've made your bed, now lie in it. So that's a similar idiom. You've made your bed, now lie in it. You say this to someone who must accept the unpleasant results of what they've done. So you can't complain now. You've made your bed, lie in it. You made your bed, so lie in it. Deal with the consequences. I don't really care. She made her bed, so she must lie in it. So this is a similar phrase to this is your wagon, you must pull it. All right, number two, be straight with someone. So this is another phrase, be straight with someone. And to be straight with someone means to be honest with someone. Be straight with someone means to be honest with someone. And again, this is a idiom. It's a word or phrase that means to be honest. So here's our quote. Once you get something in your belly, you've got to be straight with me. You've got some explaining to do. We'll feed you, but you've got to tell us the truth. Do we have a deal? Mr. Jimmy. So Mr. Jimmy says this to Bud. He says, once you eat your dinner, you've got to be straight with me. You've got some explaining to do. We'll feed you, but you've got to tell us the truth. So to be straight with someone means to be honest. And Mr. Jimmy is asking Bud to be honest with him. So here's Mr. Jimmy, and he's saying to Bud, be straight with me. That means be honest. And here's Bud. And here's another phrase, spring for you, spring for you. That means pay for you. Again, this is an idiom that doesn't mean exactly what you say. It's an idiom, it's a common phrase that means something completely different. Spring from you means pay for you. So the sax man told me, come on, little man, if Mr. Jimmy's gonna spring for your supper, the least you can do is help load the car. Grab that case over there and put it in the trunk of the Buick out back. So that's what the sax man told Mr. Jimmy is paying for Bud Caldwell's meal. He's going to spring for his supper. Mr. Jimmy's going to spring for your supper. That's what the sax man said. And again, that's an idiom. Okay, number four, bread and butter. Bread and butter. Your livelihood or source of income. Bread and butter. Your livelihood or source of income. So here's our quote. He pointed to a long, skinny black suitcase that had a leather handle on top of it and said, and be careful, that's my bread and butter in there. So Steady Eddie pointed to a saxophone case and said, in there is my bread and butter. That's how he gets paid. That's his livelihood. That's his income. So, bread and butter means your livelihood or your source of income. So, he pointed to the black suitcase and said, be careful. That's my bread and butter in there, meaning he makes his money by playing the saxophone. All right, number five. To have butterfingers. So write to have butterfingers. To have butterfingers. It's an idiom and it says, oh, to have butterfingers, to say you have butterfingers, it means you drop objects often and then they might break. Having butterfingers means being clumsy and not being able to hold things in your hands without dropping them on the floor. So this is butterfingers. It's almost like it slips out of your hands because your hands are so slippery from butter. But that doesn't literally mean you have butter on your fingers. It just means you're clumsy and you have a hard time holding on to objects. So here's the quote. I must have looked confused because he told me, That's my horn, my axe, my saxophone, the thing I make all my money with. So don't get butterfingers and drop it. So you don't literally have butter on your fingers, but it's almost like you do because butter is slippery and slick. And when you have butterfingers, it means you are clumsy and you drop things easily. So you could write clumsy or drop things as your short definition or synonym for to have butterfingers. So listen closely. A simile is a comparison of two things using the words like or as. So his face lit up like a light bulb when he figured out the math problem. So when you compare two things and you use the words like or as, you are using simile. You are using a simile. That's a type of figurative language. So number 6 is play the dozens, an informal contest where two people take turns insulting or putting each other down. More for fun and not to be cruel, they usually insult the other person's mama or family members. Think of yo mama jokes. Yo mama. So write play the dozens. And to play the dozens means you are insulting another person. It's kind of like an informal contest where two people take turns insulting or putting each other down, more for fun and not to be cruel. Play the dozens. And that's an idiom. And Thug said, I ain't trying to be funny, and I'd never play the dozens on no one. But let me ask you, was your mama, how can I put this? Was your mama as old as sand when she had you? So notice that Thug said, I'd never play the dozens. I'd never insult you. And then he says, was your mama as old as sand when she had you? So Thug is asking Bud, was your mama as old as sand? And that is a simile because it's comparing Bud's mom to sand. Older than dirt. Here's another phrase that is similar to as old as sand. When you're older than dirt, that means you're extremely old. Since the earth has been around for a long time, its dirt or soil is that old as well. And there's another idiom that is related to as old as sand or older than dirt. And here's a funny quote. Happy birthday. You don't look a day older than dirt. And then here's a cake that someone made for someone who's 85 years old, and it says, older than dirt. Happy birthday. That means you are really old. All right, number 7, worried sick. Worried sick. Extremely anxious to the point of making yourself sick. So, worried sick means extremely anxious to the point of making yourself sick. So, here's a person that's worrying so much they're getting sick. And it says stressed. And again, that's an idiom. And here's our quote. Jimmy said, Mr. Calloway here can't be your daddy. We've got to get you back home. Someone in Flint's got to be worried sick about you. So Jimmy's telling Bud, we need to get you home because someone back in Flint is got to be worried sick, extremely anxious that you're not around. Worried sick means anxious. You worry so much that you make yourself sick. Number 8, dollars to donuts. Dollars to donuts. A sure thing, to be confident. So when you say dollars to donuts, you're saying something is a sure thing and that you are confident. In fact, you are so sure that you'd wager a bet of your dollars for someone's donuts, knowing that you would win. You are confident that you would win. And then here's our quote. I'd bet you dollars to donuts that he's outside right now, sitting in that Packard, sobbing, opening about how you shunned him. And this is the thug who was teasing Bud about Herman E. Calloway, called Herman E. Calloway. I said Caldwell, but it's Calloway. I'm sorry. That's Bud's last name is Caldwell. So Herman E. Calloway is sitting in the Packard, sobbing his eyes out or crying. And the thug said, I'd bet you dollars to donuts that he's outside sobbing in his car. All right, let's time to check your work. Chapter 13, words 1 to 8. Number 1, this is your little red wagon, you pull it, meaning this is your responsibility. So make sure you have that phrase, this is your little red wagon, you pull it. And a synonym could be your responsibility. Number 2, be straight with someone. Again, that's another phrase, to be honest with someone. To be straight with someone means to be honest. Number 3, spring for you. That means pay for you. So Mr. Jimmy was going to spring for Bud's dinner. And number 4, bread and butter, your livelihood or source of income. So if you need to get caught up on any of these words, this is a good time to push pause. Make sure you have each phrase for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Make sure in the next column you have the synonym or short definition. And then in the third column, draw a quick picture or sketch to help you remember that word. And once you're finished, after you've pushed pause, made your corrections, and you're finished, you can push play to rejoin the lesson. All right, now we have 5, to have butterfingers, drop things often. 6, play the dozens, an informal contest where 2 people take turns insulting each other. So you could say play the dozens means insulting, and think of yo mama jokes. Number 7, worried sick, extremely anxious to the point of making yourself sick. She was worried sick. And number 8, dollars to donuts. That means a sure thing, to be confident. I'd bet you dollars to donuts. All right. So if you need to push pause, make sure you have all these phrases 5 through 8. Make sure you have a synonym for each, and then a picture or quick sketch in the third column. So if you need to push pause, make your corrections or finish your work. And then when you're finished, push play to rejoin the lesson. Okay, now it's time to reflect on our learning target. I can use pictures and context clues to help me understand important words and phrases from chapter 13 of Bud Not Buddy. So, would you give yourself a 4? I could teach this lesson. I wrote all the words and phrases. I wrote all the synonyms and definitions, and I drew all the sketches and pictures. Or instead of I could teach this lesson, 3 would be I could help others with this lesson. And you still wrote all the words, you wrote all the synonyms, and you drew all the sketches, but it's not to the point where you could teach this lesson. Then number 2, if you give yourself a 2, I understood and completed some. That means I wrote some of the words, I wrote some synonyms and definitions, and I drew some sketches and pictures. And finally, 1, I understood and completed little. I wrote little to no words, I wrote little to no synonyms or definitions, and I drew little to no sketches. How do you think you did? 4, 3, 2, or 1? All right, everybody, thank you for reviewing or going over the important words and phrases from chapter 13 of Bud Not Buddy. I also have another lesson that will go through words and phrases 9 to 16, also for chapter 13. So check it out if you want. Thanks. Bye bye.